On behalf of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory, I am Judy Clem, and we are delighted to welcome you this evening to learn all about growing garlic. As part of the Friends mission, we want to help educate and inspire our gardeners to become more confident in their endeavors. And so this is the first of our fall lecture series. I just want to mention a few that are coming up. We have an amazing lineup this fall. We have coming up in September, planting spring bulbs featuring Patty Staley, the Director of Horticulture for the Oak Park Conservatory. And I just found out tonight that we have a confirmed speaker for our October session, which will be about the wonderful world of chili peppers. And we have the Chili Pepper Institute coming to talk to us via Zoom from New Mexico. So I'm very excited about that. And then we also have a fantastic presentation planned for November about the local native pawpaw tree. If you're not familiar with them, this will be a great education about this historic tree. I actually have a couple of planted at our congregation property. In September, on the 10th, we will host the Fall Plant and Tool Exchange at the Oak Park Conservatory, where we will also recycle your garden pots. So please watch for information on that. I'll send a little follow-up email after Jerry's talk and give you guys a couple of links for upcoming programs. Today, I wanted to mention Patty opened up the Fall Mum and Bulb Sale. And so that's an online opportunity to support the Oak Park Conservatory by shopping for homegrown fall mums. They are simply gorgeous. And the sale is online now, and I can send you a link for that after tonight's program. We also have a selection of easy to grow tulips, daffodils, and other rare to find naturalizing and perennial favorite bulbs for sale. So announcements out of the way. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guest this evening. Jerry Ford has been growing garlic at his family farm west of Minneapolis for 20 years. He is also director of the Minnesota Premium Garlic Project, which is a Department of Agriculture program. Since 2006, he has served as director of the Minnesota Garlic Festival. Though practices for growing garlic can be a bit different between Illinois and Minnesota, the principles are the same. And Jerry will cover the basic concepts to help you succeed with your own homegrown garlic. I also would like to introduce our co-host this evening. Casey Nikoloff is joining me. This is her first time co-hosting a FOPCon presentation. So thank you, Casey, for joining us. She will manage the chat and the Q&A. So we certainly encourage you to post your questions in the chat, and we will consolidate the questions and get those answers to you at the end of the program. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Jerry Ford and welcome you to share your show.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the invitation, and I have been to Oak Park several times, have some relations by marriage there who were very involved with the conservatory. And actually lived next door, one aunt and uncle who have passed away now. So I've a place in my heart for Oak Park. So yes, this will be a little bit skewed because I am from Minnesota, and the principles are all the same, and I've compensated for some of the differences. And I am a convicted garlic grower. I'm 20 years into my life sentence, I think, and there's worse things in the world. So some of the finest garlic in the world is actually grown in the upper Midwest, a well-kept secret, and you can most certainly do that in your gardens. So what I'm going to start out with is something of a kind of a test here. We're going to talk about these three things that gardeners do wrong. Now, by the end of the class, my hope is that at the very least you will avoid these mistakes. We'll do a test at the end of the period. My wife says that I should focus on the positive, not mistakes and wrong things. So I balanced it out by putting this picture of myself from a really great crop year, plus I'm wearing this really cool t-shirt. So first off, let's look at the parts of the plant and make sure we're talking about the same things. Now, one plant gives you one bulb. It's not like a tomato, where you get one plant and you get a whole bunch of tomatoes. With garlic, you get one plant that gives you one bulb, and that one bulb will then give you anywhere from 4 to 18 new plants. We'll talk more about that. So first off, we have what I'm going to call the bulb down here in the left corner. And some people call it the head, and that's just an interchangeable term, a head of garlic, a bulb of garlic. And that bulb breaks up into cloves, which are technically individual bulbs, but we're going to call them cloves for these purposes. The stalk, what we would all of us call the stalk of a garlic plant, is actually technically a pseudo stalk, because it is actually all leaves all the way down to the very base of the plant. It's like those leaves are rolled up and then they fan out. And each one of those leaves is a wrapper around that bulb. It just continues all the way down to what we call the real stalk down here. And then at the top, in certain kinds of garlic, we have the part that bolts, the scape, which will form a flower. It's not technically an actual flower. We'll get to that. So that's kind of the parts of the plant. Then we have two divisions of, when we talk about garlic, two ways we refer to these plants. And softneck is plants that don't bolt, don't send out a flower stalk, and obviously the hardnecks do. These are, again, that's called escape, and it is a reaction to stress when they put out this scape. And I'm doing these little curly cues like you see in the picture there. It's a reaction to stress. I tend to think and anthropomorphize a garlic plant. The garlic plant, when it gets stressed, wants to have a backup reproduction system. And so it will put out this scape, but we will find out it's not true seeds as we go through this. And there are certain garlic varieties and cultivars that will bolt under certain circumstances, some that will always bolt just because they figure they're going to be stressed. And in general, the softneck cultivars are adapted to warmer climates, and the hardnecks thrive in colder places. And those descriptions, hard and soft, that refers to that pseudo stalk that is indeed a hardneck. You have trouble bending it, whereas the softnecks, they're very flexible. We'll get to the kinds that I think you should grow here in just a moment. Let's talk a little bit about the softneck, so we have a background in that. Now, if you're looking at that plant seed selection assistance chart, you'll notice I'm going in reverse order. From that, I'm just doing that to see if you're paying attention. Now, of course, notice it doesn't have a flower stalk. And you'll notice in that seed selection chart, and it's okay if you're not looking at that, we list in that chart the silver skins as a hardneck. And that's because up here in Minnesota, they're like, oh gosh, it's going to get cold. I think that's stressful. I think I will produce escape. Whereas down south in California, where they are mostly grown, they don't put out scapes, and they are a softneck. They don't get stressed. You know, things are just much more laid back in California. Most grocery store garlic that you will find is going to be softnecks for the most part. Now, if you're shopping in upscale food co-ops, you might be getting more local, which is great. These softnecks are coming from China, California, Spain, and in the off season from South America. And again, they're more adapted to warm climates. You can grow them here. Now, if you're going to grow soft necks, and that's a big if, I recommend you start with the artichoke group. It's funny that they call it artichoke. It's not an artichoke, it's a garlic, but it's because it has so many cloves and kind of looks like an artichoke. And now, why do I say if? I'll tell you that in a minute. So here you see a silver skin, very crispy sort of paper skins, lots of cloves in there. Gosh, there's a whole bunch of cloves in there. And then Enchilium is it is an artichoke type, and a grower out in western Minnesota is successfully growing it. And it has quite a bit of cloves in it. Silver skin often will have 18 cloves in there. And so there's advantages and disadvantages to that. If you have lots of cloves, you're going to get lots of plants because each clove is going to make a plant if it survives. So that's great. You got lots of cloves. It's a disadvantage because when you're going to go cook with it, you've got lots of cloves. You have to peel each one of those, and they're small. And your recipe may call for 5 cloves of garlic, and it's just little bitty things. Advantage, they're braidable. You can make those vampire repelling braids to hang by your front door and make your neighbors think you're a little crazy. And these, another disadvantage is that these are not as cold hardy. And I do know for a fact, having been in Oak Park in the wintertime, it does get cold there. We're going to talk about mulch in a little bit here. And the advantage is you don't use as much mulch on it. And the disadvantage is you can't put as much mulch on it because it's having a lot of mulch is a good thing. But if you put too much mulch, then these are really wimpy and they're not going to get through the mulch. Great advantage, there's no scapes, so you don't have to take the scapes off, which we'll talk about in a moment, why you take scapes off of garlic plants. Disadvantage, you don't get any scapes because they're delicious. My recommendation is, if you are just getting started, especially in growing garlic, or if you're like me and you're a bit lazy, I love crops that thrive on neglect, then start with growing hardneck garlics, the bolting kind. Start with them. They're easier to grow. Get your chops with that. And then if you want to, you can branch out into growing some of the soft necks. Botanists used to think that hardneck garlic was a different species than softneck garlic, but they no longer think that. It's all just the way they react and adapt to their circumstances. They're all allium sativum. And okay, so here we have the hardneck garlic family groups. And when I talk about family groups, by the way, I am not a botanist. I am not a plant scientist. I have a master's degree in theatrical production. Really prepared me for this farming thing. So these family groups are a broader category, and within them, there are a bunch of varietal cultivars within each one of these groups, or varieties, those made up names, like music, Armenian, German red, Bob's garlic. There are over 100 varieties grown in the United States, though some of those are probably redundant. Bob's garlic may be the same thing as Jane's garlic. Within that purple stripe group, there are actually 3 separate purple stripe groups that are genetically different. We kind of just lump them together, but they are distinctive, and that's on that handout. And when I say hardy, the hardiest, I mean they're more tolerant of extreme conditions like that winter thing, and more likely to produce big bulbs. I like big bulbs. So it seems that the hardiness is directly related to the number of cloves in the bulb. I have here a typical bulb that we grow at our farm. This is about 3.5 inches in diameter. It's a member of the porcelain family, and it has in there 6 cloves. So you can imagine those cloves are bigger than Brazil nuts. Well, that's a lot of stored energy in that clove. And since that clove is the thing you're going to plant, it is going to be more resilient because it's got all that extra stored energy in it. Let's see, where am I? Then porcelains and purple stripes. For beginning growers, the best training wheels garlic that you can get is something in the porcelain family. And it's called porcelain. That's, I think, is kind of obvious. It's got that nice white, shiny skin on it. And then the purple stripes are also pretty bulletproof. Now, this is part of my wrong seed, the thing gardeners do wrong. Some of the mistakes you make is getting the wrong varieties. I'll say it right now, anything you get at the standard grocery store is the wrong variety. So don't grow that stuff. So these are the groups that I really recommend that you start with. Now, the porcelains and purple stripes, they have very few cloves per bulb. Like I said, more stored energy. They're big and tasty and hardy bulbs, but there's fewer to plant. If you buy a pound of silver skins, you may get upwards of 50 cloves to plant. If you buy a pound of these bulbs, this thing weighs about a quarter pound. You've only got 4, there's 6 cloves in there, you can do the math. Quite a few less plants, much more likely that those plants are going to survive. Let's see. So here's some more details on the porcelains. There are more porcelain cultivars than this, but the dirty little secret about porcelains is they are actually all genetically the same. Every different one of these varietal cultivars, varieties, if you did a genetic test on them, they would be the same. It's how they adapt to their circumstances. If you bought a German porcelain from me and planted it at your place, within 3 or 4 years, it's going to look different. Not a lot, but there will be differences. So they love to adapt. They're all just these kind of adapting clones. With them, what else do I want to say about the porcelains? They store really well, generally. Any given season can affect the storability of a plant, and you're going to harvest in the middle of your harvesting season. Allicin is the medicinal chemical that is in garlic, the thing that is really good for you. It is also what protects the garlic plant if it gets attacked. These have been shown to be the highest allicin content of all the different garlics. So if you're going for the medicinal, then porcelains are a good way to go. In these purple stripes, we have these 3 distinct families, marbled, glazed, and then the regular purple stripe. You really can't go wrong with these. These are actually the most heirloom of all of the garlics. Garlic originally, most people think Mediterranean, China. Well, it is actually China, where the original garlic started. There is no indigenous North American garlic. There's other alliums, but not garlic. And it originally started in a place called Tien Shan. I know I'm mispronouncing that, but this place, this one in the purple stripe from second from the bottom, that's a region in Western China, about 5,000 feet. It's near Uzbekistan, and it rarely gets above 50 degrees. So this is a northern plant. Garlic started as a northern plant, and then that botany of desire thing, as human beings took it all over the world, it adapted. Let's see. It doesn't store the purple stripe variety itself does not store um, um, quite as well as porcelains do generally. Again, seasons can change that. Very hardy. There's 6 to 8 cloves there in that. And these are a few of the varieties. There are several more like that. Turning my page here. Now, in all these purple stripe groups that I'm talking about here, it is important to remove the scapes. And I'm going to talk more about that, but especially if you're going to grow one of these purple stripe families, taking the scape off shortly after it develops, and what this does is it affects the bulb size. The bulbs get bigger. It's like it says, oops, you just took my backup reproduction system. I'm going to make my bulbs bigger. One of these days, I'm going to land in therapy for trying to think like a garlic plant. In addition to this Deerfield purple, you'll see all these other varieties. People really, let me go back. People really love chestnut red, the Chevalier. And there are books that will tell you it's the best tasting garlic. I don't know how they came up with that, but people really seem to like chestnut red. So that would be, if you can find it, a good one to grow. It's fairly popular up here in Minnesota. Now the glazed purple stripe is cool because it looks different. It's glazed. The surface is kind of shiny. It has some bigger cloves, only 5 to 7 cloves. And the other nice thing is you can harvest it later. So you can pick some of your garlic, like your porcelains, in the mid-season, and then wait a little longer, a week, maybe 2 weeks, to harvest the glazed purple stripes. Very, very hardy. I have only ever seen purple glazier. I'm sure there's another variety, but the only glazed purple stripe I've ever seen was purple glazier. Okay, the marbled purple stripes. Are we hitting the purple stripe thing over the head too much here? The marbled purple stripes are the hardiest, I think, of the purple stripes. They've got the fewest cloves. They're almost indistinguishable from a porcelain. Genetically, they're different. And 5, 6, maybe 7 cloves. Easy to grow. Now, it is fun on some of these to leave the scapes on a couple of plants, because these plants, a regular garlic plant is, maybe 2 feet tall without the scape. With the scape on it, they can be 4 or 5 feet tall. And it's just, if you've ever seen it, it's this really thin stalk that goes up to a very pretty bulb. So it's fun to leave some scapes on every now and then. These store really well. You can have these well into winter if you're stored properly. Yes, I will talk about the storing properly. Now, I'm also going to recommend roca bowls. I don't tend to recommend them up here in our winters, but where you are, I think you could grow some roca bowls, and there's lots of really nice things about them. They have a lot more. They have more cloves, 8 to 10 cloves generally. But there's several varieties, and in your farmers markets in your area, you may see more of these, and there's no reason to shy away from them. They will do well for you. Okay, so let's talk specifically about selecting seed. We've got the varieties here. Remember, I said that one of the mistakes is you get the wrong seed. So some other ways to pick the right seed. Now, you remember that what you eat is what you plant. Those cloves that you peel and you eat that, well, hopefully you're not just eating that whole. Some people do. That is exactly what you're going to plant, but you don't have to take the peels off. I often get calls and emails coming up in September from people saying, I ate my seed garlic. Do you have any more? Well, I'm sure you enjoyed it. So this is cloves getting ready to plant at my farm. They're the size of my thumb or so. So in addition to picking those varieties that we just talked about, I want you to think of garlic as a perennial. If you left it in the ground, it would come back for a few years. It would be perennial. If you just left it in the ground, it would also be what we call a weed. And I know most of us don't particularly care for weeds. We replant it and space it out and give it room so that it doesn't become a weed and makes big bulbs. This also supports the high price of seed garlic. You're going to buy it once, and then if it likes your conditions, if you like it, and it will adapt to your conditions and eventually become the best possible seed stock you could have. So the best seed stock, I like to say, is always yours. It's what you have that has adapted. Now, all garlic, again, reproduces clonally, vegetatively. If you hear somebody say, we have garlic seed, as opposed to having the cloves, don't believe it. It's very rare to have true seed, and it's very difficult to grow garlic from. Like 1 in 10,000 will germinate. The plant has learned it's much easier to germinate through the cloves. Yes, there are the little bulbils in Q&A. We can talk about that if somebody wants to. Okay, so another thing about seed is buy local. Now, that's not just a fad. That's not just a good economic model. If you get seed from somebody who's already growing it near you, they've probably saved you a year or two of work bringing that up to speed, getting it to adapt. Well, that's great. I mean, if your next door neighbor is growing a garlic that works, get it from them and grow that. I have these festival logos up here because the Minnesota Garlic Festival is worth the trip. Unfortunately, it was 2 weeks ago. And the Elizabeth, Illinois one was a week ago. So you're going to have to wait till next year to buy at the festivals, but that's a great place to buy because you can see, I know at Minnesota Garlic Fest, you can see over 50 varieties in one very large room. So next year, put it on your calendar, second Saturday in August for Minnesota. Come up to see our beautiful place here. Okay, this is the topic that I really don't enjoy talking about and keeps me awake at night. The diseases. And this is why you're going to be particular about your seed. Another great reason for buying local is you can look at it. You can inspect it. If it's in your garden stores in the fall, if it's in your garden stores in the spring, turn up your nose at it. But if it's there in the fall, you can pick it up and inspect it. And I'm going to tell you what to look for. You want it to be really nice and firm all the way around, no soft spots. You want the skins to be intact. This one probably has 4 or 5 skins still on it, and that means it's really protecting those cloves. And I need to turn the page, so well rehearsed here. And then no deep blotches. This one doesn't have any blotches, but if there are these gray or kind of purplish blotches, that they haven't compromised the skins. Otherwise, it's a mold. It's a kind of mold. And if it's just on the skins, then it's superficial, and just taking off a layer of skin will usually get rid of that. If it's been sitting too long in the wrong place and has gone all the way through, don't buy that. And you don't want any holes that go all the way through. Sometimes there will be little pinholes, little wormholes. There's a worm called wireworm that can get in there. If those look like they're going all the way through to the clove, then you don't want to do that. And then very importantly is to check the root base right around this root. If this is compromised, if it's soft, then it's an indication that there could be a soil-borne disease in there, because they always come in, the soil-borne always come in through the roots first. And if that's squishy or broken up, then pass on that one and look at a different bulb. Now, we've had a disease recently. You probably know aster yellows from other plants. I know you're all avid gardeners. It affects carrots, asters, imagine that. And we have on the Minnesota Premium Garlic webpage, we have a lot more information on disease. If you want to really lose some sleep, read up on all those diseases. There's a fair amount of AYP of aster yellows in the upper Midwest now. It came in 2 years ago. No, it came in last year. Yeah, it came in last year. The little vectors, the little leaf hoppers came in last year. They bit the plants, they transferred it, but it was so late in the season, we didn't notice it. You know, some of us did that know what to look for, but a lot of people did not. And they replanted. And then it carries over in the seed stock. And often it gets worse in that, when it's carried over. So you want to look for things like these brown cloves. If it looks like this, if it's waxy and deep purple like this, don't buy this. You could offer to give them much less money and eat it right away. It's good to eat still. It won't store well. And there's no real prevention for this disease. Fortunately, it doesn't come every year. So it's just something that's going to happen, and look out for, and don't replant cloves that are infected. There's also a funny smell. Some people describe it as metallic, some as licorice or anise sort of smell. It's kind of funny to say garlic has a funny smell, so, and I'm only mentioning the worst diseases. The very worst one is preventable. Garlic bloat nematode is like the Black Death of garlic. We have had very few cases of this highly destructive disease in Minnesota, because we, early on, when we found out it was coming in out east, we implemented a testing program and strongly encouraged everybody to test, especially any seed garlic that they were bringing in. If you go to, I'll later show you a link to a directory, the Upper Midwest Garlic Directory. If somebody happens to find that before that and put it in the chat, that'd be cool. And everybody who's in that directory has to test for this disease and get a negative result, or they don't get in there. And the problem is it can carry the disease without being symptomatic for a while. So when you're buying seed garlic, ask them if they've tested for garlic bloat nematode. I know that's not an easy one to remember. Ask them if they've tested. If they haven't tested and you're still interested in their garlic, you can, I actually get paid to talk about garlic. It's the greatest gig ever. You can contact me and I'll give you a list of other questions to ask them if they don't actually do the testing. You don't want to bring this stuff into your gardens. It will destroy other things as well. It gets in the soil and you'll never grow alliums again. Dreadful stuff. Okay, here's the most effective ways to prevent disease. Inspect the seed stock, like I said before, look at it. If it looks wrong, don't plant it. Ask for that test. Establish your own seed bank. Have a closed system. Get to the point where you're only replanting from your own seed stock. I've had 2 of my varieties for 20 years now, and it's a closed system. If I get a disease, it's because it's in the soil or comes in bugs. It's not coming in seed stock. And the rotation thing is one of the easiest and most important things to help prevent diseases. Do not go back to the same spot for at least 3 years. So it's what we call a 4-year rotation. Garlic, when it's in the same spot, it will build up soil-borne pathogens. And it's also really good at depleting your nutrients. So I'm going to recommend that you rotate and don't go back to it for 4 years. I can hear some people cringing right now. And say, oh man, I put it in the same place every year. Garlic I used to say it doesn't like to keep its feet wet, but I've changed that over the years. It's that it doesn't like to sit in the same water. If the water is moving through, like raised beds or on hillsides, my whole farm is hilly and we plant on the hillsides. So the water is always moving through. That helps to prevent a lot of those soil-borne diseases. If it stays wet, it's going to get fusarium, penicillium, these molds. Oh, it's just, it's not a good thing. It's not easy to grow garlic it doesn't play well with the other kids. If you put it in your garden and you water your whole garden, you're probably overwatering the garlic. So if you can separate it, if you have drip tape in your gardens, then, you're going to do less on the garlic. There are years where I don't water garlic at all. Not these last 2 years. Lots of watering the last 2 years, but we've had pretty bad drought. Okay. Now, price on seed. Oh, people get sticker shock, and I get sticker shock. Another reason to buy local is your local farmer is probably not going to charge as much as Burpee or Territorial. Or, for goodness sakes, I looked in the Gurney catalog recently, and I thought, well, they're undercharging. It was like $6.99 to $9.99 because I'm thinking per pound. That was per bulb, $6.99 to $9.99 per bulb, and you don't get to see the bulb in advance. And the pictures, look in the Gurney catalog, the pictures are awful. I would not buy that stuff. But I guess if you can get it, you get those prices, great. A lot of places are selling by the bulb now because it's easier to disguise the fact that you're selling it for $32 a pound. But yeah, again, if you can buy low, these prices are a couple years old, and I'm just too lazy to update the slide. Plus, they're just changing constantly. The prices are changing constantly. So local growers are probably going to cost you less. My prices this year ranged from $12.95 to $14.95 per pound. Okay, again, big clothes makes big bulbs, and the best seed stock will be yours. I'm reiterating that. So that is a rule of thumb, and if you want to win, ribbons at garlic festivals, then that's what you want to do. Big clothes. All right, I'm turning the page again. And once you find a cultivar that likes your conditions, stick with it. Unless you just can't stand that garlic, stick with it and keep planting that one. Sure, try out some other ones. Maybe keep them separate. Try, if you're going to bring in a new variety, don't plant it right next to your tried and true one, just in case there's going to be some vector that transfers some disease. We can talk more about how garlic does propagate and all that in the Q&A. Talk about that there is no garlic partying going on out there. Okay. So when do we plant? There's that other thing growers do wrong, the wrong time. In general, it's in the fall, obviously. Especially if you're beginning, don't try planting in the spring. There's a way, I don't even want to tell you there's a way to do it. It's hard. So if you see, and I still see this, garden stores with garlic in the springtime. It's like if you wanted to buy zinnia seeds now, why would you do that? But if the price is good, buy it and eat it in the springtime. Because same thing. All garlic, especially our northern varieties, require vernalization. They need to go through winter. in the ground. So plant in the fall. Now, your university extension recommends late September to early October so that you get, and they say, so that you get root and top growth in the fall. Oh, I'm sorry, I disagree. When you put the clove in the ground in the fall, it will first put out roots, and that's what you want. You want it to establish roots in the fall and then go dormant. But if it puts out a shoot, if it starts to grow top growth, then what's going to happen? That top growth is going to freeze. And the clove will probably survive, but you've lost that energy. So what you really want is just root growth, and then in the spring, have it get your top growth. So what I'm going to say is don't plant before October 15th. And you can plant right up until the ground freezes. I think the sweet spot for you is going to be October 20th through October 30th. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Soil prep. Organic matter is king. The more organic matter, well-composted organic matter, if you're doing soil tests, if you have a soil organic matter level of 4, 5, 6, everything else is going to fall into place most likely. So compost, finished manure, green cover crops, planting in fallow ground that isn't compacted, those kind of things to make sure you have lots of organic matter in your soil. And with this fall planting, you could, because you're not planting till October, think about what is there before it. Now, you don't want another allium there, right? Because that 4-year rotation, no leeks, no shallots. But if you had, say, snow peas or even a cover crop of clover, well, what does that do? It fixes nitrogen in the soil. And that's like free nitrogen. And then you can work that in, cut it, work it in as more organic matter. Now, the soil pH is fairly important. And your extension folks and if you have master gardeners and just experienced gardeners, garden stores, they know how to balance this. If you say, hey, my soil pH was 4, then, well, God bless you. But no, if it was 4, then you can say, okay, what am I going to use? I won't go into all of that. We can talk more, excuse me, in Q&A about that kind of thing. And about the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Basically, garlic is a heavy nitrogen feeder. You want to get all of your nitrogen in the soil in the fall, incorporated and available. And I love slow release type nitrogens, anhydrous, ammonia stuff. Well, and we're certified organic. We don't use that stuff anyway. So if you can get lots of nitrogen in the fall, and if you have good, rich, loamy soil, you won't need to do any spring fertilization. Just get all of it in there then. If your soil is lighter, sandy even, then you'll want to do some spring fertilization for the nitrogen, a liquid thing that will permeate through the mulch. Okay, you want loose soil. I use a large rototiller on the tractor. Believe it or not, garlic roots go down a foot or so. I know when you pull the plant out, it doesn't look like it, but it has these very fine roots that go way on down. So good tilth deep is a good thing. The less resistance they face. And then beds, I do an 8-inch spacing. You want, again, that heavy nitrogen feeding. They want to have kind of a radius that they can pull nitrogen from, no closer than 6 inches. Now, if you're doing, say, a wide row of 12 inches or so, you could put them 6 inches in the row. But they don't like to be close together. They don't like to shade each other out. And they don't like to compete with other plants. So depth, if you're planting these northern garlics, then they really, I know they'll tell you different. They'll say 3 inches down, 4 inches down. No, they can be right below the surface. So that the tip is just below the surface. I say this deep. Use your thumb and push it in there, and that's how deep it goes. They are very cold hardy. Now, if you're not planting northern cultivars like those porcelains and purple stripes, you may need to go a little deeper. The root base of the clove needs to be down. If I need to demonstrate that in Q&A, I'll show you, but the part of the clove that was at the root base needs to be down. This sounds self-evident. And the tip needs to be up so that that stalk doesn't have to wrap around the clove to get up there. Let's see, what do we want to talk about next? Mulch. I'm going to recommend that you put mulch on top of your garlic. It will give it some winter protection. Part of the problem is, and this is a picture of my garlic poking through in May, late April maybe. But that plant is actually about 6 inches, 8 inches tall because I put on 4 to 6 inches of mulch. And it's chopped up corn stalks, so it's heavy mulch. The winter protection is because of freeze-thaw cycle. It's not so much to keep the clove from freezing. It's because if it hasn't gotten its roots down yet, then the frost can heave it up out of the ground. Mulch is also great for moisture control, to keep the moisture, if it's moving through underneath there, to keep it fairly consistent. And I know everybody loves weeding. One of my favorite pastimes is to go out there and weed my garden. The weed control. So let's see, what else do I want to say about mulch? Okay, you're going to leave this mulch on until you harvest. There is a myth out there to take your mulch off of the garlic in the spring, unless you just really want to and want more work and love weeding, then go ahead and do that. If you're growing these northern varieties, they're going to push through the mulch. And then you just leave it on there. And it's going to help control your weeds. And it'll keep that soil underneath very nice and supple. Let's see. Here's a big celebration when we finally get done mulching our 6,000 cloves or so. And we've even mulched after snowfall. Not much to do in the wintertime. Sit around and eat all that great garlic that you've been storing. The flamingos are my snowmobile guardians. They, believe it or not, I know you don't have this problem in Oak Park, but we have rabid snowmobilers who will just they'll see those posts out there and think it's a slalom course. So problems with that. And let's see, not much. So in the spring, if it's not coming up, and don't panic, but if you can pull back a little mulch and you see that the plant is maybe going sideways, then you can either remove some of the mulch, or I do what I call fluffing the mulch. I just go through and with a pitchfork and just kind of lift it up and get some air in there, just to give the plant easier to push through. People will say, take the mulch off, the ground warms up faster. We have been doing field trials for 5 years now where we've done that. We take mulch off. Yep, they come up faster. And by July, they're all the same. It doesn't make a difference by July when you're going to harvest. So if you don't have to take the mulch off, have I said that enough yet? Okay, weeding. If you got a lot of mulch out there, weeding is relatively easy. This was a weeding party that we threw, and obviously some of them started the partying before the weeding. And especially if these plants are 6 inches or less in height, they just don't like competition. Once they get up 8, 10, 12 inches, I'm done weeding by that point. I don't care anymore. They beat the weeds by that point. Then watering, I used to say to stop watering in late June because of the disease problems. Now I say plan ahead, don't put your garlic in a low spot where you have to keep watering. That's one thing to look out for is dips, because then the water's just going to sit there. Again, hillsides, raised beds, excellent places to put garlic if the soil's good. This picture is actually a Chinese grower and his wife that he started a email pen pal sort of correspondence with me, wanting to know how people in America grew garlic. And I said, well, this is a very specific part of it. And we had these great back and forth conversations. And he said, at some point, we're going to hit the Great Wall. And that's when they censored him. They shut down his account and he just went away. But I learned a lot about Chinese garlic growing in the interim. Okay, scapes. They're going to start doing these little curls. Here, I'm pointing at my screen. You can't see me point. Here's the cursor. They'll make these little curls. That's the ideal time to take them off. Even in this picture in the middle, if they get that far, it's still fine. Any time is a good time to take the scape off. But they're tastiest when they're just doing that first curl. So we take them off there. I actually have 2 different people who come out. One of them will take my scapes off, take some of them off and sell them to the chefs in the Twin Cities. Another one harvests them and has a business making pesto out of the scapes and just sells out every single year and only gives me like 2 jars. But I get free labor getting my scapes off because what? I like big bulbs. And that's taking the scapes off would do that. But they are delicious if you've never had them. Okay, when to harvest. I stress out about this so much. I have called off harvest crews before. It's like they'll show up and I'll look at it and go, no, it's just not ready. Which is better than saying, oh, we should have done this a week ago. It's going to be in mid-July-ish, probably for you, maybe even early July. When the bottom leaves are brown, bottom 3 leaves, especially on these porcelains and purple stripes. So this is a leaf here. I'm assuming we can see my cursor there. That was a leaf, it came all the way out here and it's gone. And then here's the second leaf and it's yellowing down. This third leaf is just starting to turn brown here. Once that one, it looks like that second one, it's time to go. Time to get these out of the ground. Another way to think of it is if 2/3 of the plant are still green, it's time to go. Don't wait until they're completely brown. Each one of those leaves is a wrapper around that bulb. So this wrapper that I am taking off now, that was a near the bottom leaf. And the wrappers in the very middle, you probably can't see that, but there's several wrappers there. In the very middle are the top leaves. And what you want is those outer leaves to be drying down and making a beautiful package, sealing up that garlic bulb. And the inner leaves are still nice and supple and the cloves are nice and wet. We'll talk more about that very shortly here. So that's how you know when to harvest, with those bottom 3 leaves. And then if your ground is nice and supple with that mulch on there, these hard-neck garlics will just pull out of the ground. 6,000 cloves this back in July, and I think we used a soil fork 3 times to get that bulb out of the ground. They'll just pull out. And soft necks won't do that. You'll have to dig all of the soft necks. I should have put that in the disadvantages. Okay, curing garlic is not dehydrating. Curing is a carefully controlled process. You'll see there's a dehumidifier here. Unfortunately, I don't think, oh, here's a big fan. I run fans at first. I seal up my shed and I run 2 dehumidifiers and 3 big fans to keep airflow going. And then I gradually decrease the amount of, fortunately, I have solar panels because I use a lot of electricity in July. It's also not easy to walk in that shed. It is, the smell and the humidity is overwhelming. So the whole idea is to get that plant to dry down to the point that it is forming a very nice consistent package. The airflow is to keep mold out of there. Penicillium mold could be a real problem if you don't do airflow during this curing period. So you want, when you buy your garlic, you want it from people who have done a good curing process. Now I leave the roots and the leaves on during the curing process. It's a gourmet product. With the roots and leaves on, it's taking in that energy from them. It's like other plants in the lily family. How in the wintertime, the leaves will draw the energy back down into the bulb. And I think the roots are taking some moisture into the inner part of that plant out of the air. And I just like doing that way. It's again, it's a premium product. Then how do you know when you're done? When you cut this stalk, okay, the whole plant's going to be brown or yellow. And then when you go to cut the stalk, nothing wasn't in the shot there. Here we have it in the shot. When you cut the stalk, nothing bleeds out. If you cut it too soon, then it will start to lose liquid. And that's also a point where infection can set in, where mold can come in. Once it's nice and dry, it's nice and sealed. That's how you know when it's done curing. It's going to take 3 to 4 weeks to get that completely cured down. And the part of the reason you want to do this is it does enhance the flavor. It mellows that whole flavor. It doesn't have that, that really acerbic bite to it, just that rich garlic flavor. And the main reason is it's going to store. It's going to store for a long time if it's cured properly. So when I'm ready to clean it up, I'll cut the roots down to 1/4 of an inch or so. I'll cut the stalk to about 1 inch above. I'll brush this part off. I'll remove the outer wrappers, and it makes a beautiful product. Now, when you're storing it in your home, what you want is airflow and indirect light. You don't want it directly in sunlight, but you don't ever want to store garlic in the dark. Root cellars, no, not unless your root cellar's got a window and it's not terribly humid and you've got some airflow. When garlic, again, thinking like a garlic bulb, when garlic gets in the dark, it thinks what? It's in the ground. And people are always telling me, oh, my garlic sprouted. I put it in the refrigerator. Well, yeah, it thinks it's in the ground in the dark and it's winter. So it's going to try, or it grows the roots. And it's like, yeah. So put it out in the open, airflow, show it off to your friends, make them jealous of all this beautiful garlic you grew. So that's the more proper storage. Now, of course, once you peel a clove, it should go in the refrigerator. But if it's properly cured, this is the best way to store it. Keep it right out in the open. Okay, so we had those things. The wrong seed is a big mistake people make. So the right seeds, disease tested, acclimated to your area, and I like big bulbs. So get big cloves. The wrong time is don't plant in the spring, unless you just want to make a hobby of it. And you can grow some garlic chives that way in the springtime. So in the fall, And then the wrong place has to do with grow the northern varieties. You're in a northern climate, and you don't want a place that's going to stay wet, and you want the right soil conditions. So here's some contact information. This is the time to take your screenshots. You can call me and email me. Here is that garlic project website for all more than you'd ever want to know about growing garlic in the upper Midwest. And then here's that directory that has, I think there's 15 growers now on that list. And your extension has some resources about growing garlic here. And that's my presentation.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Jerry, so much for sharing your knowledge here today. Just a very wonderful and comprehensive presentation. I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure folks on the line can say the same. And speaking of garlic, I look like a vampire right now. So we've been monitoring the chat for questions. We have some 3 really great questions in the chat. So I'm going to start with one from Peter. And earlier in the presentation, you talked about the importance of buying local when it comes to seed stock. Do you have any recommendations on suppliers for the home gardener?
No, not in terms of seed catalogs. I'd love to think that if that's what we're asking about is, someone other than your local farmer, that's who I really want you to go to. I want you to find farmers and other growers who have garlic and buy it from them. There's a Wisconsin-based seed company, Jung, Jung seed. You probably know the catalogs. I just haven't seen any good garlic come out of them. One is there. Okay, here's one. In Madison, Wisconsin, there is a company called Keene, Keene, garlic. And they're a full-scale catalog company. They use very, very high standards. And their prices are still even lower than, I think Johnny's is already sold out of garlic for this year. But then Gurney's or any number of them.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. And Judy found the link to Keene. So folks, if you're on the line, please go ahead and look in the chat for that. Appreciate that answer. We also have a question from Debbie in the chat. Can garlic be grown in containers?
Wouldn't that be nice? No, not really. Again, I anthropomorphize the garlic too much, but I think it knows it's in a container. It wants to be out there and wilder. And roots. The roots are longer than you think they are. So if you had one bulb, and again, heavy nitrogen feeder, if you had one bulb in a 24-inch pot, maybe you could do that. But you can try if you don't have any other way. Certainly give it a try, and people have had some success, but you can't put very many in a pot.
Sure. Yep. So definitely not the preferred method, but if necessary.
Right.
So thanks for that. And then Judy had a really great question. What happens if the neck breaks off when you're harvesting your garlic? So Judy digs out the bulb, but why would this occur?
It'd be nice to know what variety of garlic it is. If it's a soft neck garlic and it breaks, it's because it's a soft neck.
Okay.
If it breaks when it's a hard neck, then either rough handling or it's got a problem. Maybe it was damaged in a storm, hail, whatever, or maybe it's got a disease that's in that stalk. Aster yellows will do that to them.
Yeah, I think when we were talking earlier this week, we discovered that I was growing the soft neck variety because I wasn't getting any scapes. So that's why I think some of the bulbs detached or something from the stem. Yeah. Still
and
delicious.
If you harvest, that's all that counts. The other thing is if you're harvesting too late, then your stalks can be brittle.
Great. Any other questions, guys? You're welcome to unmute if you want to chit chat, but I'm going to wrap us up right now. Okay, we do have another question that's coming in, but first I want to just thank Jerry, and we'll get to the question in a second. Jerry, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with us. It was in depth, and I have a full page of notes that I was writing down on everything, and I've grown garlic, but every time I learn from somebody new, there's just so much information to take in. So I think the rest of the folks on this Zoom tonight probably benefited as well. So thank you so much for spending the time with us. And we hope you have a wonderful season next year, enjoying all your garlic. I'm going to end the recording, and we can answer a few more questions if you've got a couple more minutes.